and welcome back to my channel. In my last video I shared my dream cast for my book The Girl Beyond the Gate, and if you didn't see that video you can watch it right up here. I never know what side it is. But after I posted that video I got a few questions through from viewers saying, what kind of methods do you use for creating your characters? So I thought I would do a video about that today. As always, this is just what works for me. Lots of people will have lots of different methods for creating their characters, and different methods will work for different people. So experiment, try and figure out what works for you. This is literally just what works for me. It's by no means prescriptive and you don't have to do it. As an added bonus, I've also created a worksheet that you can download for free, and I will link that down below, so be sure to grab that after you've watched this video. Before we jump in, just a quick reminder to hit that like button and subscribe if you like content like this, and also a reminder to please pre-order my book. The Girl Beyond the Gate is coming this month. It's publishing in ebook and audiobook on the 22nd of March, and you can pre-order it by clicking on the links down below. Okay, so creating characters. Characters for me are probably the most important thing of a book. You can have a really strong plot, you can have an amazing premise going on, you can have all sorts of crazy things going on, but if you don't care about the characters, I just don't find myself eager to finish the story. I just kind of think, meh, I don't really care what happens to this character. I'm also a huge fan of writing morally grey characters and flawed characters, and this is probably going to be more prevalent in my genre, which is psychological thrillers. I find that morally grey characters are much more prevalent in psychological thrillers than other genres, just because of the type of story it is. My personal belief is that your main character doesn't necessarily have to be likeable. A lot of the characters I write, particularly my main characters, do quite morally grey things. Like, they'll commit crimes quite often, and it's kind of figuring out how to make sure that that character, even though they're not necessarily the most likable character, making sure that the audience understands why they're doing what they're doing and will still continue to root for them. So even though they're doing bad things sometimes, they've got a reason for doing it, and you can kind of get on board with that reason. That's the kind of gist that I go for when I'm creating my characters. So when I sit down and think about my characters right at the beginning, before I even start writing the book, I think about some very specific things. There are a lot of templates you can get and a lot of worksheets you can get which sort of ask you random questions about your character, like what eye colour do they have, what hair colour do they have, what's their favourite pizza topping, like really random questions. And for me, I just don't find those kind of worksheets particularly helpful. Personally, I don't care that much about what the characters look like. I actually purposely don't go into a lot of detail about a character's appearance when I'm writing my books, because I just don't care. As a reader I don't care, as a writer I don't really care. So you know, that's not the information that I really want to focus on. So for appearance, usually what I'll do is when I'm plotting my novel, I'll create a board in Trello. And if you want me to do a video on how I use Trello for plotting my novels, I can definitely do that because I find it really helpful. But on Trello, I will create a card for each character, and then I will drop in a picture of what I visualised the character to look like. So it will usually be like a celebrity photo. And the only reason I do that is just so that I don't end up with a plot hole where I said that a character's blonde in one scene and then they're brunette in the next scene. Like, it's literally just for quick reference. I don't really focus too much on what they look like. What does matter to me is what has gone on in their life so far to make them who they are today, and how does that affect how they act within the story. So I really like the method of coming up with your character's personality that's described in Save the Cat Writes a Novel. In that book she says that you should come up with your character's problem, want and need. So let's go into each of those things a little bit more. So the problem that your character has is basically what makes them flawed. No one wants to read about perfect characters because it's not very realistic. We want to read about characters who are realistic people. Like, they make mistakes and they, you know, mess up, and everyone messes up, and that's the kind of person we want to read about. So their problem is something that's really deep rooted, and I think in the book she refers to it as a shard of glass, which is quite a good analogy. But it's basically something that happened usually sort of in their past, sometimes it's a childhood thing, and it's just stuck with them. It's caused issues throughout their whole life, and it affects everything they do because of this shard of glass. So let's take one of my characters from The Girl Beyond the Gate as an example. Let's look at Jodie, who is one of the main points of view. The premise of the story is that Jodie has moved to this gated community because she wants to start afresh. She wants to get away from her past, she wants to leave everything in the past, and she wants to start a new life. So obviously the question then comes up, what is she running from? What is this thing that she wants to get away from? What's this thing that she wants to keep hidden? That is her problem, and it affects everything she does throughout the whole novel. When she moves into the Grove and starts interacting with people, a lot of how she interacts with people, she's very standoffish, and she doesn't like, you know, getting into deep conversations. She doesn't like talking about where she's come from before the Grove. That's all down to her problem. That's all because of this shard of glass that she's trying to keep hidden, and it affects everything she does. It also means that when the inciting incident comes about, which is basically that she starts becoming friendly with her next door neighbour, it is a real issue for her, because she's kind of in this place where she's like, I really like this next door neighbour, I want to start becoming friendly with her, but my shard of glass is that I'm trying to keep everything hidden, and so I'm keeping myself very guarded. And so it's kind of that thing of she's got what she wants to hide her past, but then this new want is conflicting with that, if that makes any sense. So then the second thing is their want, and I did just mention, like, Jodie's want is to keep her past hidden. So this is the thing that the character feels like is going to keep them happy and is going to make them happy. So they could be striving for a promotion at work, or they could be striving for, you know, finding their soulmate or whatever. But this is a thing that they really, really want because they think it's going to bring them happiness. It's not necessarily going to bring them happiness. But again, you need to be really clear on what your character wants and what their goal is, because that is going to affect how they act. A character who wants to keep their past hidden is going to react very differently to an inciting incident of becoming friendly with their next door neighbour than a character who's really happy to talk about their past and wants to make friends. So coming up with what they want will then help to inform your decisions for how your character reacts to certain things within the story. And then the third thing is their need. So the need is what your character actually needs to become happy. Usually your character isn't aware of this need. They're being stupid, they're just focusing on what they want. But actually what they need is the thing that will bring them true happiness. Again, using Jodie as an example, what she actually needs is to move on from her past. She doesn't need to hide from it, she doesn't need to run from it, which is what she wants. What she needs is to accept it and move on. Now with my genre, psychological thrillers, obviously sometimes they can be quite dark, and you don't always have a happy ending. So if you're aiming for a happy ending, what you want is your character to realise what they need and to shoot for what they need and, you know, become happy because they've got what they need. But if you're not aiming for a happy ending, if you're aiming for like a negative character arc, for example, then it might be that they don't realise what they need, and so therefore they never become happy. Or maybe they do realise what they actually need, but they just can't bring themselves to go for it. So the final thing I look at when developing characters is their Enneagram. And if you don't know what an Enneagram is, it's one of those like personality quiz type things. And you can look it up online, you can actually take the quiz. Sometimes I'll take the quiz imagining I'm the character and answer as if I'm the character just to see what comes up. But there are essentially 9 personality types, and I will link the website down below so you can have a look in detail at each personality type. But the reason I love the Enneagram system so much is because once you've figured out which Enneagram your character is, it will reveal information like what will make them happy, what will make them uncomfortable, how they deal with certain social situations, how they form relationships. It can really, really inform how your character acts throughout the book. So just very quickly, the types of Enneagram are the perfectionist, the giver, the achiever, the individualist, the investigator, the skeptic, the enthusiast, the challenger, and the peacemaker. So again, let's look at Jodie. I decided that she was a type 5, which is the investigator. So one of the first things that pops up when I look at type 5 is their deepest fear. So 5's fear being overwhelmed by their own needs and the needs of others. To cope with this fear, they withdraw from relationships and maintain a minimalist lifestyle, focusing on the intellectual as an escape from the demands of the world. So that instantly tells me a lot about how Jodie is going to react to certain social situations. She's very withdrawn. She doesn't like talking to people very much. She doesn't like having deep conversations. She prefers to just focus on facts and figures. So that's a really good insight to how she would respond in conversation. The next thing is core motivations. 5s are motivated by a desire to be competent and possess a strong understanding of their environment. This motivation drives them to a nearly constant state of learning and knowledge accumulation. So again, this is really good for deciding what Jodie wants. What does she want out of moving to the Grove? Is it that she wants to make lots of friends, or is it that she wants to, learn as much as she can about her neighbours and figure out the situation that she's in? It also lists key personality traits, like they're extremely difficult to crack, they appear lost in thought and absent-minded, they're extremely independent. All really good stuff for, developing your characters. It talks about their core values. So 5s tend to have little regard for social niceties and customs. That's again a really good thing for when you're first introducing your character to a new situation, and whereas one person would be really polite, maybe Jodie wouldn't. How to recognise an Enneagram 5, so this is really good for sort of body language and describing that kind of thing. And I particularly like the part where it says healthy versus unhealthy Enneagram 5s, because again, if you're thinking about doing a positive or negative character arc, it might be that if it's a positive arc, you start with the unhealthy version of your Enneagram, and then they strive to be a healthy version of their Enneagram. Whereas if it's a negative character arc, maybe they're sort of in the middle and then they become more and more unhealthy as the story goes on. As I said, I will link the Enneagram website down below so that you can take a look at it and figure out which one works for your character the most. But the printable that I've created does also list out the Enneagram types, so you can kind of download that and look at the character's problem, their want, their need, and their Enneagram type, and hopefully that will help you to develop a really fleshed out character. The final thing I will say when it comes to character creation, and this isn't going to work for everyone, but as much as you can plan out your characters beforehand, and I think you should have a really strong vision of who your character is and the way that they're going to respond to certain situations. As much as you can do all of that beforehand, I do think a lot of character creation comes when you're actually writing the novel. Particularly with the novel I've just handed into my agent, my second novel, I found that I didn't really understand my characters until about halfway through, and then once I reached that 50% mark, I suddenly clicked and I was like, I know who these characters are now. And so the final half, I was very, very clear on who I was writing, but it meant that I did have to go back onto the first half and tweak things and make sure that everything they were saying and doing made sense for who they ended up being. So that's just something to bear in mind. You can plan as much as you like, but it might be that things develop and change as you're writing, and you should definitely be open for that. So I really hope this helped you. Don't forget to grab the free download down below, and please do pre-order my book. It's really, really helpful for authors when you pre-order, and if you do read it, please do pop a review. I would massively appreciate it. And I hope you're all really well, and I will see you next time. Bye!